Hi, I'm Michael, and behind the camera is Ellie. We are the Bill Paying Hobbyists, and we're using our hobbies and skill sets to pay down debt and to save up for a down payment on a house. In our last pen turning for profit video, we did a basic poor man's version of the hybrid style by using an exotic hardwood blank and an acrylic blank. As you can see, it turned out great. In this video, I'm going to try turning a traditional hybrid blank. I'm really excited to try my hand at this. It's a beautiful blue and burl blank, and I'm going to pair it with a copper bolt action tech pen kit like this one to give it an artsy Southwestern style. It's a new style for me, and this is my first time turning on hybrid blank. So let's go give it a try and learn something new together. This is the beautiful hybrid blank we're going to use. It is the nice, beautiful iridescent blue colors with the burled wood on either end, and we're going to be using about half of it for this pen. This is our pen kit. It is a bolt action tech pen. Spring, spring, spring. Don't lose your spring. I'm going to put this right here back in the bag. This is our tube, our ink cartridge. This is the tip for the pen. If I can get a hold of it. The stylus end, it'll go on the end cap. Since this is a bolt action pen, the end cap is all one piece. This is our mechanism that will make the ink go in and out. There's our clip, and this is an end cap that just screws off, and then the stylus will screw onto the top of it if you want to use it. The stylus on this kit works very, very well. First thing we need to do is we need to cut our blank to the correct length. I'm going to cut this side and use this side for our blank. I put my tube in here, I use my gauge right there, set this up, this will cut and it will give me just a little bit longer, about 1/8 of an inch of blank longer than my tube. As you can see, my blank is just a little bit longer. This gives it room for me to square off the ends of my blank when I'm turning. My blank is now cut, so our next step is to find the center of the blank. And to do that, we're just going to make a line that connects corner to corner, corner to corner. In the center where they meet is the actual center of this blank. To do that, I just need a pencil and something with a straight edge on it. That's the center of our blank. And one other thing I like to do is make a little indent that helps the drill bit find the center. Don't hit it too hard. If you hit too hard, it's going to crack your acrylic or your resin, or even split your wood that you're using, and then you have to start all over with a new piece. Now it's time to drill a hole, and we're going to go over to the drill press for that. We're at the drill press, and we need to drill our hole for our tube. This particular tube for this kit is an 8mm. So I have my 8mm bit. And a funny story, if you have a hard time finding your 8mm bits, go to an auto parts store and look for their set. They have a 6, 8, and a 10mm set used for drilling metal. That's where I found mine. I just made sure it was nice and sharp, and it works perfect. Setting up your drill press, the first thing I want to do is make sure that my drill bit will go down far enough to go all the way through my blank. That will. This is the vise I'm going to use to hold my tube. I'm going to put it in here and clamp it down. If it's too tight, don't push too hard. Adjust it. A little adjuster knob right there. That holds it nice and square. Make sure you have a backer board in the bottom. You want that there to help with blowout. Now you see it's loose. I don't want that. I want this all the way down. I want it nice and tight, and I want it there so it doesn't move. This will help keep from losing a chunk of my blank at the bottom because it still has more to go through. One other thing I want to test is make sure my drill bit is straight, and we're ready to go. Take your time when you're drilling, especially with acrylic. You don't want to get too hot. Any kind of plastics or resins, take your time. And there's our hole. We have everything we need so that we can glue our tube into our blank. Now, as with acrylics or any type of resin, anything that's really not wood, something that is translucent, you can see through it, you should always paint your tube or paint your blank. Last time I painted my tube on the last one that I did, and it didn't work out the way we wanted to. So this time I'm going to paint the inside of my blank. As this is a blue, we're going to use some midnight blue and this nice little tiny brush. Keep your coat of paint as thin as possible. If it's too thick, when you insert the tube, it'll just scrape off the paint. That is all painted up. Now we'll let that dry, and then we'll come back and prepare everything else and get it glued up. So it's been an hour and my paint is dry. Now I need to get everything ready so that I can epoxy my tube into my blank. Right now this tube is smooth. I don't want it to be smooth. The epoxy will not stick to it very well. It could slide off, and if it doesn't stick well, it will cause a blowout, which means a chip of this will fly off and break off as I'm turning it. and I don't want to do that. So I just take a piece of 120 grit sandpaper and I rough up my tube. Nothing drastic. I'm not going to sand a hole in it. I just want to get it nice and rough. There we go. That's it. Wipe it off a little bit, and I'm going to use my JB Weld. It's 5-minute epoxy. You mix it up for about 30 seconds. Then I put it on my tube and I set it in there. It says 5 minutes, so I let them sit overnight. I want it to set up nice and strong. Make sure to get a nice even coat to reduce the chance of air bubbles. Now this is probably one of the most important parts of preparing your blank for turning. If you don't get enough epoxy on here, you'll get a blowout. There's no fixing that. You have to start over with a new blank, new tube, wasted money. When you go to put it in, nice, easy turning. So we have our tube in our blank, and I recessed it just a little bit, just enough. Now we let it sit overnight and come back tomorrow. Yesterday we took our hybrid blank and we cut it down to size for the tube, and we also drilled the hole for the tube, and then we epoxied the tube into the blank. We let it sit overnight, so now it's dry. Our next step is we want to make sure that there's no residual epoxy inside the tube. If there is, our bushings aren't going to fit in there properly and it's going to wobble and it's not going to sit right. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my X-Acto knife and cut out any residual epoxy that's in there. This one we did pretty good. There's not really a lot. There is some residual paint from painting the inside of the blank, and I want to cut that out and then we'll be ready to go. This is my Jet 12 by 21 lathe. What that means is I can turn something that has a 12-inch diameter up to 21 inches long. If I want to make spindles for a chair, I can make the nice little spindles up to here as long as I don't go any further than 21 inches. This is the headstock. This is where the motor's at and the gears and everything else that turn the lathe. This is my tailstock. It is free turning. There's no motor in it. It turns if the headstock's turning. On the headstock, I have my pen mandrel. It's a number 2 Morse that fits inside the headstock, and it just has a long shaft on it, and this is where my pen blank will go. On my tailstock, I have my mandrel saver, and it does exactly what it says it's supposed to do. It saves the shaft on my mandrel. It's free turning. It's got a bearing inside with a hole that goes all the way through the middle. That goes on the mandrel shaft. That way, it has something stable. If I didn't have this on here and I'm pushing when I'm cutting, it's going to push on this, it's going to bend it, and then this is going to wobble and fly everywhere and it's going to hurt because it will hit you. This is my tool rest. It slides over here, and this is where my chisel will rest while I'm cutting. A couple tips when you're turning. When you're using your chisel or your gouge, whatever you happen to be using, when I'm doing pens, I keep this locked into my side, I keep my elbows in, and I stand in one spot that's comfortable for me at the lathe with whatever I'm turning. And then I rock back and forth. I use my finger as a gauge. It rests right behind the tool rest. My chisel rests on top of that, and I hold down with my thumb. And I just run back and forth, back and forth. Keep my elbows in. If I'm out here, or if I'm here, and I'm just using my arms are going to go like this. I'm going to end up going in and out, and it's going to be very ugly on the piece that I'm turning. It's not going to be straight. It's not going to be smooth. And I may even possibly gouge into my blank, or whatever it is I'm turning, and I'll cause a chip out. It'll fly apart. It can hit me or someone else, and it'll hurt. When you rest your chisel on your tool rest, I'm using my finger here, and that's going to slide back and forth. My thumb holds my chisel back and forth just like this. I want the blade of my chisel to be in the center of this shaft. You always want it in the center of whatever it is you're cutting. Don't tilt it so that your blade goes down. Don't tilt it so that your blade goes up. Keep it level and just go back and forth. Nice, easy, slow passes. This is the control center of my lathe. This is the digital readout. It shows me how fast it's turning per minute, revolutions per minute. This is my speed control knob, my power switch, and my directional switch. For turning pens, and since I'm on this side of the lathe, I keep it in forward. It can also go in reverse, but I keep it in forward. This is the power switch. This is a safety switch. If this safety switch is out, my lathe will not work. With the safety switch in, I'm going to turn it all the way down to the slowest speed, turn it on, and my lathe will turn at around 188 revolutions per minute. I can turn it all the way up, and it will turn up to around 3,650 revolutions per minute. So now I'm ready to turn, and my blank is going to go on my mandrel. What you need to turn are bushings. Almost every single kit out there has its own set of bushings. The bushings give you an idea of how far to turn this down so that it fits your kit properly. So what I do, I always keep an extra set of spacers on my shaft for my pens. This is an old bushing that I don't use anymore because you see that nice big gouge it has on there. I don't use that anymore. So I will use this bushing here. Then I will put one of my Tech Pen Kit bushings on. My blank will go on. Then my other Tech Pen bushing. And then I'm going to put 2 sabers over here. What this does is it keeps my blank away from my mandrel on this side, and it keeps it away from the saber on this side, and it gives me more room to work with my chisel. I'm going to lock down my tail, give it a nice little turn there, not too tight. Don't get your tailstock adjustment too tight. It's going to cause your shaft to bow a little bit, and it's going to be out of round when you're turning, and it's also going to wobble while you're turning. You don't want that. Some people turn at the highest their lathe will go when they're cutting. In this case, at 3,600 RPM. I generally do not turn that high, so I'm going to cut it. I am going to put this one up to about 3,000 RPM. It's about the fastest I've ever turned, but I'm going to take my time and take very, very small cuts since this is my first time. Also, make sure you wear something to protect your eyes. I'm wearing shatter-resistant safety glasses. You can wear a face shield, whatever you need, just something to protect your eyes. Here we go. We're going to go to about 3,000. Now when I start getting full long pieces like that, that means that my blank is now round. Look at that, nice and round. And it's getting a little warm. I don't want it to get too hot. When epoxy gets warm or it gets too hot, it will start to get soft. And when it gets soft, it will become out of shape. Now's a good time I need to square off my ends. To do that, we need to break this down and put on some different equipment. On this side, I put my drill chuck, and I have an off-centered sanding jig that goes on this side. I'll lock that in, get that in place. On this side, I have my faceplate screwed to 3/4 inch plywood with some Velcro and Velcro sandpaper. It's about 80 grit. I use a push pin, punch pin, drive pin, whatever you want to call them. It goes here all the way back to my chuck. Just helps stabilize it, tighten this down. All right, that's in there. This is just a little bit smaller than the inside diameter of my tube. And I'll put that on there. What this is gonna do is it's gonna square off the edges, and it's gonna take the edge of my blank down to my tube. I don't wanna sand too much. If I make my tube too short, then it will not work on my kit. And I have to square up both ends and make them both down to there. I'm gonna sand until I start seeing the shiny edge of the tube. Check it every so often. Don't get in a hurry. Look at that, I'm already down. I'm good to go there. There we go, nice and shiny. Now I'm gonna get close to my bushings, but I'm not gonna go all the way down to my bushings. I don't wanna cut my bushings, I don't wanna sand my bushings. Well, now I'm gonna switch out and I'm gonna use my sacrificial bushings, which are basically non-stick plastic bushings. I'm gonna leave this one here because I need a gauge, so I need to know how big to make the ends of my blank. Just gonna sand these down. I'm not gonna cut anymore. I'm gonna use 180 grit sandpaper with a 1/4 inch backer board. It just helps keep it nice and flat. I'm not gonna use a lot of pressure. I'm not gonna push real hard, and I turn my lathe down to about 1700. And I'm just gonna start shaping this up nice and easy. Now I have all these spiral lines and I need to get rid of those, so I'm just going to sand with the length of the tube, with the lathe off. Very lightly, I'm not going to sand really hard. If I don't get rid of these lines, they're going to show up no matter what I do when I go to polish this. Same process with 320 grit. When you use a rag, make sure you don't have a lot of excess material loose. If it gets caught up in the lathe, it will wrap your finger up and it will possibly rip it off. Be careful. Now I sand with a 500 grit foam pad. And last with 1500 grit. I use my compressor to blow out as much dust as I can. Then I wipe down the blank with denatured alcohol to make sure it is clean as possible. If I don't, when I apply CA glue, the dust particles will turn white. Time to get this finished up. A piece of cardboard to protect my lathe and turn it down to around 600 RPM. I use mercury adhesive CA thin and medium glue as a top coat. I will put 5 coats of thin and then 5 coats of medium. Between each coat of CA, I will give it a spray of accelerator. This makes the glue dry instantly. The next step is Abernet. It's a mesh sandpaper. It goes from 180 to 400 in 5 steps. All I'm doing is getting rid of the rough lines and the rough edges. I just want to smooth it out. I don't want to take my CA off. So it's very, very light, and I take my time. Put my lathe at about 1300. Basically, I'm doing this until it's not shiny anymore. Seems counterintuitive, but you need to make it smooth. If you don't, you won't have a good shiny surface when you're done. Just like with the sandpaper, I want the spiral lines gone. And last one, 400. Our Abernet is done. The next step, the fun step, is to wet, sand, and polish. I'm using water on my lathe, so I'm going to protect the bed of my lathe so it doesn't rust, and that's just simple enough. With rag here. For wet sanding today, I'm going to use micromesh. It has 9 different pads. It goes from 400 grit to 12,000 grit. You'll see as I'm using it, the water is going to start to fling off as I'm using it. When the water starts flying off, that means you're done with that grit. Wipe it off, go to the next grit. I'm going to do this at probably about 1800 RPM. Not a lot of pressure. That's done. I'll wipe it down. I'm going to check it. Do I have spiral lines? If I have a little bit of spiral lines, get some lateral sanding in. Not a lot. Again, I don't want to take my finish off. Next grain. Repeat. If I'm using the same grit, I don't have to wipe it off every time in between spiral sanding and lateral sanding. Look at that. Ooh, that's going to be pretty. However, I'm done with that grit, so I am going to wipe it off now. Now, if you're ever at this point and you're turning a wood blank that you put CA glue on, and you start to see a dull spot in your wood, I don't have one, but if you do, that means you sanded the CA finish off, and you need to sand it down to the bare wood and reapply your CA glue and start over. It happens to everyone. I don't know that I'm going to be able to sell this pen. I think Ellie's going to keep this one.
That is beautiful. But then I like all your pens, so...
Yeah, but this time you got the best of both. In one. Or anybody out there, send us an order. We'll make you a pen. As beautiful as that is, we're not done yet. Before I do my last step, I'm going to check my ends because I've been using a lot of CA glue and I need to make sure these ends are flat. So to do that, I just get some 600 grit wet dry sandpaper. And put a board down on my lathe, my 600 grit wet dry sandpaper down here. When they stick like that, tap it down on something hard and it'll come off. Okay, you need to be careful. You don't want to break all your finish off. See that extra residual glue right there? I need to get rid of that. It needs to be flat. I mean, I've already spent the time to sand my blank down to my tube. I need to make sure that glue is out of my way. And I have it on both sides. Very light circular motion. I do not use, you can if you're feeling spunky, an X-Acto knife and try to cut it off. All right, one last step. There are many different polishes out there. I use my glass polish in a Honey Bear with a microfiber cloth. Doesn't take a lot. That's it. That's all I use. Slight pressure and letting the blade do the work. It's like using an orbital sander on your car. Another cleaner microfiber just to get any residual off of there, and do it one more time. That's shiny. One last step, Renaissance wax. This stuff can get expensive. I think this little bitty jar of 65 milliliters was $16. I'd take a square of paper towel, wipe, that's it. One last wipe. The Renaissance wax not only polishes, but it also helps to keep the fingerprints off of your blank longer. It's done. Spectacular. Time to assemble. There's our blank, our end cap, our tip, the stylus end that can screw into here, our ink cartridge, our spring that I left in the bag. We're going to make this the top that goes for the end cap into here, and the tip's going to go here, just like that. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take a chamfer tool and I'm going to chamfer the end inside parts of my tube so that my kit will actually go in and seat better. Doesn't take a lot. Remember, it's brass, soft. 1, 2, good to go. This tip threads off. This is my insert. This part gets pressed into my pen blank. What I don't want to do is press it so far that I don't have enough to thread my tip on. You can screw it all the way down if you want to, and that will be the amount that gets pressed into your tube. I'm going to back it off just a little bit, and then I'm going to press it in. I'll set it up. I'm going to put this tip down, and I'm going to bring this to it. This is a piece I made myself, and use my press, my drill press, as my pen press. Make sure it's nice and straight. Now, let's get it down, get it good, tight. There we go. That's in. Now we need to do our end. Where do we want the clip to be, Ellie?
Right there.
It's only going to hang over that much of the...
It's going to be right there.
Right there?
Right there.
All right.
That one's it.
Let me have it.
Right there.
The spring on this pen is actually very tight, which is good. You have to be careful so you can get it in there really good. Hold it nice and straight, and that's our pen. Look at that. We need to put the ink in there. Screw the tip off, ink cartridge in. So it sits down like that. Time for your spring. If you want, you can put the spring on first. Goes either way. Get it down in there. Tip on. Boom, boom. Now if you want the stylus, showed you that before. This screws off, the stylus screws on, and we're done. Hey bud. It's numbers time. For our shop supplies, we're looking at $4. For our time and material, we're at $43. We plan on selling it on Marketplace for $72. That should give us a profit around $25. We hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got some value out of it. I know that I really enjoyed making this pen, and I hope I get to make more hybrid pens in the future. Please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.